All right, we're here for the regular meeting of the Board of Ethics, April 8th. And roll call, please, Lisa.
Bill Falsey, Terry Kelly,
Here.
Kathleen King, David Nesbitt,
Here.
Keith Silver.
Here.
Also present is Dee Ennis, Deputy Municipal Attorney, Linda Regnard, Administrative Hearing Officer, Julia Tucker, Assembly Counsel, and we have a quorum.
All right, Dee, before we approve the agenda, do we have a motion to reorganize the agenda?
So moved. Second?
Second. What are your thoughts?
What I'd like to do is ask Julia a question that relates to some stuff we would cover later on, although we can even cover that sooner than later, just not to, so she's not sitting in the meeting for an hour and a half. And then I would like to tell the board too that at 12 o'clock, Stephanie McSwain, who is the head of the boards and commission group upstairs on the 8th floor, who gets people appointed, and also Therese Williams, who is the staff person for the LURSA board, are going to show up at noon. Because there was an issue of the annual disclosure forms for LURSA and the timing of that.
Okay.
And I just told them noon again because it's easiest. And so
Okay.
I'd asked, included in your motion to amend the agenda is to allow when they come in if we could take up the LURSA board. And I'd be glad to lead that discussion.
Okay. All right, so any opposition to that? Go ahead.
I would prefer to approve the agenda and then just make a change, change the order of the day.
Is that whatever?
Only because then I have to actually amend the agenda to
Oh,
what you
okay.
want it to be, and then it looks all squirrely.
Okay, whatever is easier. So
Yeah.
I guess, move to approve the agenda. Anybody second it? Any opposition? All right, so that carries. And then
Change
you
the
want
order of the
Change
day.
the order of the day. And hopefully you're taking notes very carefully to accommodate that. And then, so you're ready to start
Yeah,
with Julia then? All
Yeah,
right.
one of our issues that we've been sitting on for quite a while is publication of the results of the notice of potential violation. And it's very clear that when we find a violation, we are publishing that. It's the ones that we don't find a violation that I think, I'm not sure we're handling correctly, or we should get a sort of clearer guidance. And the reason for that, Julia, yeah, there is the AMC 1.15.070B1. That provision provides that if the board determines the facts alleged in the notification of potential violation, even if proven, do not constitute violation, or the board lacks jurisdiction, the board shall return the notification of potential violation to the complaining party without further action, and they shall remain confidential. And I think we have been reading that to mean that we look at something and we decide that even if that it's not true, and a lot of times we think at least that should have a cloak of confidentiality. That provision versus if you look over in I, written report, let's see, it says, it talks about a written, of the same 070. It talks about that, that at the conclusion of an investigation, finding a violation of this chapter, we prepare a written report and it goes for electronic publication. So I think we're pretty clear on the ones where there's a violation found. I think where we've been sort of stumped is on ones where there's been no violation found. Are those, and of course I'm sure Julia can back this up probably, that the intent of this was if someone makes an accusation, it's not true, you don't publish it because you don't in any way tarnish that person's name. And yet meanwhile we're doing things like, did the school board violate the ethics code when it helped support, supported the bond measures? Well, those are public interests. Those really don't, to me, fall under the same confidentiality cloak. And so we've been carrying a couple matters under that, that we didn't really know what to do with them. And also, I looked up our website. Our requests for advisory opinions are very nicely laid out. They're nicely published. Our notice of potential violation, let me show you what this looks like on the website.
It is difficult because I was looking at it last
Made very
night.
little sense to me at all, so that we need to figure this out. Again, we may be looking at a major code rewrite, but in the meantime, we have a number of homework assignments that are
Floor.
Oh, okay, I give mine to her. I don't care.
Oh, sorry.
I saw this last night because I was doing the same thing. I was writing my report last night and going, okay, notice potential violations really well laid out. Notice of the advisory opinion is very well laid out. And I had to kind of zigzag around here to find those potential violations.
So I guess because in two places it says, one is if facts even as taken true would not be a violation, but that's sort of that preliminary one where we
Right.
say no. But even again, the later that there's language about at the conclusion of investigation finding a violation that you do a report. So it doesn't really cover the situation where we've spent a fair amount of time determining whether the school district violated the ethics code and supporting the bonds.
What
So-
about, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
what about G4?
Okay, and again, there's another, you're absolutely right. And G4, for the record, reads, if the board does not find a violation under this chapter, the board shall prepare a confidential statement of closure listing the complainant and respondent, the assigned identification number, the allegations, the hearing date, and finding that no allegation was substantiated. And I think that's sort of what this is, the website
Yeah,
parallels this. So Julie, I didn't know, as someone who helped write this, if you could shed any light on this, and I apologize, Julie, I didn't give you advance notice of this. But,
Yeah, okay, so these are the things that I'm thinking, and so because I didn't have advance notice, I'm thinking out loud, to you, but I'm thinking that there is a gap and that you wanna make sure that by the time you address the rewrite, that you close the gap in a way that you're comfortable with. In the meantime, it seems like you can close that gap in practice as long as the practice doesn't violate some other provision of the code. So, I think that Terry's, okay, so that's one thing. I think that as Dee talked about, the history of this code was one of the problems that the assembly saw with the prior code, is that people would make complaints, they wouldn't stay confidential, they'd never be justified, but yet it was all in the press and everything, and so they really bent over backwards to try and correct that. The thing that Terry is pointing to, I think, is important because excuse me, this is supposed to be a confidential statement. It says right there. So publishing it on the website, you're already breaching confidentiality publishing it on the website. So that doesn't seem to be a good fix for anything. So you want to figure out what you want to do about that, because you really should, until the code's changed, your closing statement on even if they don't find the violation. So first thing, as Dee said, is we have that stage, which is like the preliminary, preliminary hearing, sort of a
like a
thing.
probable cause.
A probable cause hearing, and if what they're saying, even if it was true, was not, you're not gonna find it to be a violation. It's kinda like a summary judgment motion, and then you just dump that, and that doesn't go, the vision of the assembly at the time was that doesn't go anywhere. That's returned to the, thing, you say, this isn't a violation, we're not accepting this. Because even if it was true, it doesn't, violate the code, so, yeah. Then, the idea of publishing the ones where you did find a violation was for, preventive in the future, and the idea of the ethics code wasn't to be zapping everybody.
Yeah, come on in, Stephanie. This is Stephanie McSwain with the working conditions. Thank you for showing up. We're doing another little matter, but then we'll
Okay,
switch over to
sure.
you.
And so then this looks like the one that Terry's talking about is the only thing that is on there about the specific to the complaint. What I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing is that, you spend a lot of time on these, and it would be helpful to be able to speak your minds on what you found. And so this one allows you to do that anyway, if you have the
Respondents. Consent.
respondent's consent.
Right.
But even without the respondent's consent, I think that the part of the, there is a provision about, someplace in here, that's not an advisory opinion, but is an ability of the board to give advice, and I'll find it in a minute. And so I think that in the interim thing, what you could consider doing is writing it up. I mean, it doesn't, in this example that you gave about the bond, is the, and I think that the respondent here and the protections were about individuals, not about entities. So that if you have a situation that involves an entity, for sure, then to me, you can decide that under your advisory capacity, you're gonna write up something that says that you looked at this and here's what you found. And it wasn't a violation, but here are recommendations. And, yeah,
Well, and I understand, I appreciate that. Where we've had some issues is, quite frankly, is with the mayor's office. Now, this mayor has said he waives confidentiality, but the next one may not. And, you know, and we get complaints where we end up finding, where we end up dismissing, but we have to, we published, for example, a letter to, as a suggestion of how to maybe handle things, but it does become difficult. And I don't know if that's what we're trying to look at
Yeah,
here.
well, that's one of them, yeah.
right, so then, if I hear you correctly, you could have situations here that have come up under the present mayor and, or the present administration, and the mayor waives confidentiality, so you don't have any problem in going through and, because if it's about the mayor, it's hard to write around that, you know.
No, that's been the problem we've
But-
had, is try to write
If it's in
around
there.
the position.
And so I think that for right now, that doesn't seem to be an immediate problem because this mayor has waived it, and what you're talking about is in the future. And I think that's one of the areas that you wanna target for a code change, because it's just a gap here. And so you don't wanna get in a situation where where you have a mayor that you found was not a violation, and it was real instructive, but the mayor doesn't even wanna get into it. That's what I'm hearing you say, and it'd be hard for you to write sort of in this general advice about things without having it somehow be tagged to the mayor. And so you might wanna say something and distinguish something. I mean, I don't know the one about the mayor, but if it has to do with the office of mayor, something that rather than something personal. There are things about that we know have been published about this particular mayor, because it started out with that business about being the trustee and
Yeah, it was like
being
my-
the mayor at the same time. Okay, so, and that was more personal, but you could have things that were about purely about the office of mayor and how things are interpreted. And it would take, creative writing to make it not be that way, so you might, wanna have something that just puts in, that if it's an investigation instead of this one, because we don't really have this problem. We don't have a problem. Since 2007, we got 8 years now. And I don't think the sensitivity about misuse of opinions is at such a heightened level that anybody wants to keep everything hush-hush. So there's not the same degree of concern, once you've investigated and found it not, that's as instructive and as preventive law as when you find that it is. So propose a change in that, is my recommendation, and just, you know, not.
I'm trying to fill the gap now.
Yeah, if you don't have, if you, when it's personal like that, when it's more of a, you don't, I think that it's important to do workarounds. If that one, if you don't need to do a workaround now, because this mayor has waived it, then focus for that particular instance on changing the code, because you got a little bit of time here. The new mayor doesn't take office until July, so, you know, get it in there and do that. The other one about the school board, and let me just take a second here to find out if I'm right.
It might be in their 090 ethics education program.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, maybe like
Yeah.
B4.
Powers of the board.
Yeah, so one is under 06012, establish rules and procedures for the conduct of board activities consistent with the requirements of, it says of due process, but that's also, okay, so then under 1.15.060B, invites, the board shall perform the following duties to foster and support ethical conduct by employees, appointed members of any public authority, and elected officials. So, at the request of all these things, you know.
Yeah, you have 4, right? Prepare materials.
Yeah.
Designed to assist, educate, coach,
Yeah.
and, you know,
Yeah,
support.
same thing, and you can include things in your annual report, you know, recommendations for actions deemed important. So you can also recommend a specific change in here, but you can also recommend that, that sort of like a summary of the things that you looked at, and here's your guidance, blah, 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 you know? And so then you have like the bullet points of that annual report. I mean, what a better way, because then people don't have to wade through a whole bunch of opinions to find out what the board actually said. Here's the bottom line. You know, the school board gets to do this or doesn't get to do it. I mean, I don't know what without them, but you know, here's the deal. This isn't against, because let's say that you find something. I mean, the annual report is also a good place to do this, as in your opinions, but the annual report is an opportunity, and this is what the assembly talked about in my recollection at the time. Now, let's say you see something in because, you know, in 2006, in pulling all that together, we can't possibly envision every single thing that you're gonna have. So let's say something comes in here, and it is gut-wrenching to all of you, but we left it out of the code. You know, it's not in there. What a better place to say in the thing, without naming anybody or something like that this activity, it's not that the activity isn't confidential. I mean the confidentiality doesn't go to the activity. That we looked at this activity, and it is not prohibited by the code, but we think it should be. You know, there's your thing, because those things that you find that aren't violations could be good instructions, so people don't keep filing violations about something, or also the cue for people to fix it. If they really wanted this to be a violation, don't do that. But if they didn't want it, and it shouldn't be, and your recommendation that it's not a violation, then maybe they could clear up this over here so that it's not confusing to people, and anytime somebody comes out and participates in information about a bond issue, that they're not whacked with a bunch of trouble and that you have to go and look at it. And so that's you know, so I would use those.
Now, we have had 2 notable, that I can think of, conflict of interest matters where we spent a lot of time, and which would be very, very helpful had they been written up. We didn't find a conflict, but you know, all the board's reasoning on why this and both of them are going to be recurring type of situations, and boards and commissions, conflicts of interest. I mean, invaluable advice. So right now, you think in the gap, because those didn't involve individuals, well, we could come up with some other way of measuring it, I guess, or taking that information. Although, again, the examples, the specific examples of what informed the issue, though, is the problem. They're ones that, one of the ones we looked at, the attorney's office continues to get.
I'm sorry, is that-
Yeah, come on in,
I
Trinity.
didn't know if this just come in.
Yeah, please. We continue to get questions on that relate to one of those that we found no conflict. And other people wanting to complain, I'm sure even the ombudsman gets it too. So they'll also be helpful in terms of use of municipal resources to say, okay, here are the things we were looking at. So those aren't entities, those would be individuals.
Now,
not
the
sure,
first
so
thing
maybe
is to
we
get
just
them
change it.
responded to
Agree.
agree, is one, because then it helps them, because you validated that they didn't have a conflict. But another way, even though the specific instances inform the decision, the confidentiality part is if the circumstances are not only so unique, but the uniqueness of the circumstances are themselves confidential. But you don't have a duty of confidentiality
Mhm.
that's greater than so let's say that some board and commission thing came up, and part of the deal is that the member is on public record it's public information that they have a contract with the city. And so you gotta look and see what the deal is about that, okay? Well, the fact that they have a contract with the city is already public information. And if that's the thing that then I would identify the person, you don't have to keep that. In your decision, you have to keep their identity, you don't name them, but you say, in this situation, we found that the code does not prevent a board or commissioner from having this position and also having a contract with the municipality. And if that was intended to be a conflict, then more work needs to be done on the code.
So if they waive it, then that's easy. If they won't waive confidentiality, then we have to, currently, would go through another where we try to put out an information.
Well, because remember Terry, the one we dealt with, where we ended up having the person publish something, so we had to stop everything because that person had messed up. But there was some troubling aspects to that case where members of that board were stepping around the table and working, acting the board, and they were
Yeah,
stepping in,
right.
acting as witnesses as well. But because the case got dismissed, we couldn't, so far as I recall, we couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think we sent a letter to that particular board saying, you really should, we dismissed this, but you really shouldn't be doing this. But it would have been nice, and what we didn't do was publish some sort of broader document on the website saying, look, when this kind of stuff comes up, boards, and you're right, I suppose we could have scrubbed it such that, it said, look, boards and commissions should by and large be,
You want it to go to as many, because it's not just one individual.
Well, that's right.
Board, you want it, you don't want somebody to say, well, that was the election board, and so, this board can do, that was P and Z, the difference in boards are some are quasi-judicial by nature.
Right.
Or they're sitting, or they're both advisory and quasi-judicial, and so you have to look at where they're sitting, and so the same rules might not apply
Right.
to them, so you wanna group them that way, that for adjudicatory boards, here's our advice in general.
Right.
This is what we looked at, we looked at factors that included blah, 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 and this is our advice. You get to advise them. We're about compliance, about bringing people in and getting the word out. And why I suggested the annual report is you have a duty to do that annual report, a duty to inform the thing, and so instead of it just being numbers, who cares how many you looked at?
Right,
We're not.
exactly.
It's not like the ombudsman where they want to know the bang for their buck on that. An annual report that says we looked at this many and this many. Okay, well, how is that helpful to anybody? But what is helpful is is we looked at these situations and we published this amount of guidance. And here's a
And
short
that's really
count of
true.
our,
Yeah, I think
of
that's
our
right.
guidance. You know, it's not about how many cranked through, although God knows, our heart goes out to you, that you would have cranked through millions to me that, you know, it's not that I'm
But yeah,
doing
but as a-
that,
as
but
a
you know,
public
that's,
document, right, that's-
but in terms of the long-term value, and I mean, and the fact that you had to go through so many on disclosures was what told you that there was a problem in how it was set up for the disclosures and what you're supposed to be reviewing. So, I mean, so that ties, you know, there's value to that, but, and I didn't mean to poo-poo that, but if that's all the report is, some places need to crank out how many things they did, because people pay fees, and there's a lag time, and you wanna know how many you get through, but we're not production oriented here.
Well, I think that goes to the general question of what is the role, the law from a higher elevation, what is the role of the board here? And is it principally advisory and to, like you said, provide guidance for groups and entities and individuals over and above adjudicating gift disclosure forms or whatever? I mean, what's the
It's both in here, and that's why they
Right.
have this whole list of duties, and so
Right.
you don't have to choose here, because it's not like P&Z. P&Z formally sits as an advisory board
Right.
on reviewing legislation, or they sit and
Adjudicate.
convene as an adjudicatory board. This board does all that in one sitting, and the question is, and that's up, as Glenda points out, that's really gonna depend on, it's not gonna depend so much. You have the code to support you, and the direction that you take the code in is up to this board.
Okay.
Okay, we got enough to me? Okay, did I earn my lunch today?
Let's
Thank
discuss
you.
the rest of that later on in the
Yeah.
agenda,
Yeah.
because
No,
if
that's
I
fine.
could,
Well, Julia, thank you, as always,
Yes,
that's
thank you,
helpful.
Julia.
Can we count this as a makeup?
Yeah.
There are three
You got
Rotarians
three
here.
Rotarians here,
Yeah.
right, and I just, appreciate the opportunity to tell you how much I value the work of this board. That's always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Julia.
Okay.
You know what I forgot to do
You
is,
should sit like you-
we should probably see if we can get those before I forget, approve the minutes from my
Yeah,
old
the
meeting since we're
regular.
here. Because I skipped right over to handle Julia, but why don't we do the meetings really quick?
Right, and we'll just go back to the beginning once we do these
Oh, you want to do
changes to
want
the
to do
agenda.
These girls first?
We can,
Yeah, we
because
only
I have
have one
something else to
minute.
tell you about that,
So we can do.
about a consent agenda idea that Kathleen King came up with last time, so.
Okay.
Let's
I just want to make sure, don't let me forget that, because we
Okay.
skipped over that part to get to. Okay. Did you want to read this part?
Could I
please?
do
Yeah,
it?
please.
we had asked assembly members, elected officials, whether they would file the annual disclosure forms. So we're going to change the code and say we need annual disclosure forms, and the APOC filings are not enough. And let me introduce Stephanie McSwain is the person who appoints or gets appointed, recruits, gets appointed boards and commission members. And she, I believe, you're handling pretty much the, or you are the staffers of each board. Who's getting these annual disclosures? How does that
They go
process
to
work?
I send it out to, when somebody's appointed, I send it out to the newly appointed commissioner or board member, and then they usually return it to either me or directly to the clerk's office.
Mhm.
Typically, they return it to me, and so I'll forward it to CC and Amanda Moser and it goes to Lisa Schlusner
Mhm.
in the clerk's office.
That's me.
Oh, that's you.
Hi.
Hi there.
All four of us work
Yeah.
together all the
Yeah, all
time.
the
and
time,
don't
so,
we?
uh,
never met, yeah.
Nice, so, so the process is.
So that's the
pretty much-
initial,
so
okay?
Typically, yeah,
Okay,
right.
so then the next year, on January, the next year that they've been on after 6 months, it comes up to January. Right now, are you supervising all the staffers to say, hey, we need these annual disclosures, or how's that working for boards and commissions, not first of people?
No, it's my understanding that they go directly from the staffers are supposed to go to the clerk's office to Lisa. Is that correct?
Uh-huh.
So they'll get those to Lisa.
Lisa, who's directing the staffers to do this? Is it the clerk's office, or?
Who's directing?
The staffer saying, okay, at the first meeting in January of your group, or the first meeting in the new year, you need to get new disclosure forms.
That direction isn't necessarily out there, and that's why we don't have a complete, we don't have 100%, on these boards every year. Is because we get them more so often when they're appointed.
Okay, so I don't even know if we have it in our code that they're supposed to be doing these annual disclosures. I think if anything new comes up, they're supposed to be doing it.
Well, there is in the code, it's by the February 15th of each year of your term. You're supposed to file a new disclosure.
So we don't have, at this point, though, direction for the staffers to do that. And does each board and commission have a staffer?
That's a better
Yes.
question for you.
Yes.
So could that be a function, Stephanie, for your
Absolute-
office
oh,
to tell all the staffers, please do this?
That's an easy,
Okay.
absolutely.
Then how do we coordinate where they send their stuff back? Do they send it to their, well, I mean, the staffers at the meeting, and you make everybody fill it out typically, right? And so, except for the few people that are missing. My concern is if some of it goes to the clerk's office versus you.
I think what makes probably about this process, what would make most sense is to have the staffer collect all of them, because they keep, as they keep attendance, they keep the roster, they keep everything. If they could collect everything and remind their commissioner board that they need to get that to them by the next meeting, or just actually physically hand it to them, and at that point give one zip file or one, send them directly to me in one, and then I get them to Lisa, and then we have like checks and balances. Okay, so it's past the staffer, that's their responsibility. I mean, whether
I prefer that, and I prefer to be like in communication with both of you, in case some do come into my office, because like the assembly boards and commissions, I put together the compliance report, and so I have everybody I know I'm
So you do a
responsible for,
spreadsheet.
and then I can, then I know when I've got 100% compliance with the Board of Equalization, because that went out of the assembly department, but I still oversaw the process. I sent that to Monica Whedon, and she produced a report for me. So if you could both produce your own reports, and then that way you know when you're at 100%, and then submit that to me so that I can submit it to the board, that would work better than it,
Okay, report, you mean a spreadsheet with the names and checks?
Right.
Are we talking about each, like, so every, I'm just thinking, like, time-wise, realistically, the hope is that every staffer would collect those and have, be given a direction. It needs to be done. Like, it's not a, we'll get around to it. But with that being said, not everybody is compliant and gets things in on time. So are you saying that you'd like us to wait for everyone at 100% and then send it? Because I'm thinking almost like each board, like when one board is complete, sending it to you, so we can then you can check off. Okay, so if that works, or it'll be easier just to. I think we just might be held up though.
And you may not get. You have so many. You may not ever get 100%. So I know with the report that I give to the Board of Ethics, I just every time there's a meeting, I just print what I have, and then eventually I get to 100%, and I don't have to print it anymore. But it just looks like this, if you want to pass that down, and it just has a list of everybody I'm trying to get by board, and then as I get them, I put in the date that I got them, and each meeting I submit until I get 100%.
That's, I think that's like a running total. I mean,
Well,
that just
exactly.
really-
Here's where we are now.
That's realistic, and that would be, I think, most effective, because I thought I heard you say, like, we'll just hold out until we get 100%. Well, I mean,
Yeah, you may
I wishful thinking, but I would love that, but I mean, some people just.
I was gonna say, then the board might decide, that a certain date by April 1st or something, that if they're not in, then you're gonna write a letter to these people. Say, do it or else, I guess.
I mean, I think that's absolutely, at this point, I mean, you can't fill that out, it's like.
Well, especially when you have a staffer.
A staffer who's
But I
helping
am
out.
sympathetic to her position, because she's working with volunteers. We're all volunteers in doing these jobs. So to herd volunteers into doing a form, you have control over the staffers,
Right,
who
but
can
not
then have a little more, the volunteers.
Right.
to
And
get
I
it done.
think
but-
that's the,
And I'll just say, I did not have a lot of resistance in terms of my volunteers. They were just like, "Oh, really? We have to do that? Oh, here you go." Did you see me say my volunteers? Okay. They were pretty. Well, we didn't know we had to do that. Okay, here you go. And then the next year, it's not that you didn't tell them last year. It's just that they need a reminder because
Right,
that's
a
not
friendly
that's not
reminder,
high on
right.
their list of things to do. So I sent out there was maybe. I think for a while there was that one holdout, but he was in Africa. I mean, we couldn't do anything about that, So I think just a friendly reminder when you don't get them. I think you'll get like a big return.
I would say, most 99.9% of our volunteers are so, oh, hold on, let me get that to you. And I like use the example when somebody reminds me of a year prior, like, I'm the first one to say, oh, okay, well, I forgot that memo from a year ago, but if you could, just so friendly, absolutely, like just a friendly heads up, you could get that to me at your earliest convenience, and they usually have it certainly by the morning, or, oh, here we go, and then I give it to you, and it's just,
And your first friendly reminder may end up having to be sort of an educational piece because people don't typically know. I don't even know. Did you know that there was the annual disclosure requirement? Probably not. I had to pretty much dig to find it. And so I can send you the information about where that is in code so that if you want to do sort of like, here's how it works, and this is just a reminder. So.
what I probably will do is send out, contact a staffer with some of that information.
Okay.
Wordsmith it around a little, and then ask them to email that out to all of the commissioners or board members, and then they can return it to me directly.
Okay.
And we'll just check them off one by one, and I think it's also just good to check in with people on the boards and commissions and say, thank you for your time and service as well. I know most people aren't getting paid, and it's time, and it's just a good connection.
I was going to say, and one of the things this does bring up is the fact that in the old days, the person in my position would on occasion go to a board and commission. I don't know how they pick 5 out of the 44 per year to go to and do an ethics presentation. It seems to me what might be helpful, besides me getting training some more of the ethics officers, is to have a shortened version of a PowerPoint, about 5 pages, on what is a conflict of interest. And that could be handed out to the staffers, and that's something maybe we could work on. And literally a PowerPoint that you just hand out, but because otherwise how do they know what they're disclosing?
Or not.
So now that I got a few things off my homework list, I'll just keep
You could
putting
even
them.
take that further and go to different departments. It would be interesting to hear an ethics presentation in various departments in the municipality. I mean, even like during a lunch hour, like on a, not required, but if somebody wanted to listen, for half an hour, like a working lunch, brown bag lunch, and listen to you folks explain, I think that just education for everybody is just like a brush up or, oh.
And
Be
one of the
interesting.
ideas was, in the past, there's been ethics officers from different departments, but like sort of group ones, so 8 or 10 of them, and that they would be more trained. Well, we stopped sort of using them, and they're sitting there ready to be appointed, but part of it is, it's easy enough to train them on PowerPoints, but until you've been through a couple of the battles. So whether that person and one of us helped give a PowerPoint presentation to this group, or because I really do think until you've been, we know from these potential violations where some of the lines are, and I'm not sure just someone who's trained to read through a PowerPoint can really be that helpful. So that might be something we think about, but again, that's asking an awful lot of time from all of you. Let's say you did 2 or 3 of these per year, so that's 2 or 3 times an hour. But it's a fair amount. And you could, either me or the other, or the ethics officer for that area would be there too. In other words, you don't necessarily have to do the presentation, but certainly the questions that are going to come up, what about this, that, it would be helpful to have someone. So for us to think about that, but there's really where an educational, think of it, you're a new board member, you don't know any of this. And I don't think that's being taught at this point. I know the staffers don't do an ethics training, do they?
No, I wonder if
Yeah.
you could even invite, like maybe have the mayor's conference room and invite everybody
We
else
could do
in
like the
law,
44
but mine-
steps, well, but yeah, we do some presentations. I do to certain boards, but if you had a bunch of the staffers, 20 of the staffers here and 20 of the staffers there, how in their world will they ever know any of this stuff? But anyway, I bring that up because I think that's a pretty big gap. Now we're gonna ask people to fill in forms when they don't have the information really to recognize what they're filling in. Well, let me introduce Therese Williams. She's the not the staff person, she's sort of the administrator of the LRSA boards. And do you staff all the LRSA boards as well?
Yes.
Or, okay, so
Yes,
you
I'm
do all
their
of them.
administrative staff, yeah.
So how many boards are there, LRSA
I
boards?
think we have 24 right now, and I do need to ask about Subversa, Eagle River. I don't know if anybody's been tasked to do this for them also.
We wouldn't know to do that.
Yeah.
You have 24 boards that you staff?
Yes.
Good.
24 boards.
I hope they don't have meetings all after work in the evening.
No,
Maybe
it
go home.
varies. They're required to have meetings quarterly, at least quarterly, and then they notify me, and then I put public notices out. And then some are large, some are small. A lot of them don't have big issues. Upper O'Malley has a lot of issues. Glen Alps with the state park that has a lot of
We're
issues.
familiar with Glen Alps.
Yes, yes, you are. And Girdwood, we have Girdwood. And, yeah, so I send out all the information and monitor all the elected officials up there. For some reason, at the origination, whoever created the limited road services determined that they would be elected officials. I don't know if they need to be an elected official or if they should be appointed
Right.
at this point. A lot of people who reside on the hillside volunteer, they're retirees. They do it willingly. It sounds a tad more appealing to be an elected official. But then again, on all these boards, you'll see where the same people rerun every 3 years. It's hard to get people to volunteer, and they aren't getting paid. So you see the same people year after year after year.
But right now, we do have elected and appointed
Yes,
board members.
they're all
And
elected.
isn't there a move recently where they were going to undo that? I think that all board members were going to be appointed or something. I think there's something going through the
Well,
assembly that they want to change that, I thought.
Technically, they should all be appointed. However, if somebody elected, if somebody steps down, moves, resigns, then we appoint to fill that seat.
So you-
That's how that
To do an
is.
interim appointment?
Correct. And I get the paperwork, and then I send it to Stephanie.
Well, and if you have a vacancy, in other words, no one ran, so there's a vacancy, does that one
Correct.
get appointed as well?
Yes, I asked them to. Some of them have a hard time finding somebody who's willing to
To do it.
step in and step on board.
And the ones that are appointed, do they have an annual term, January to January, or depending, because there's a timing issue here. Your boards, you can get their February 15th disclosure. Your boards, some of them are just elected yesterday, right?
3-year terms.
Okay,
Yeah.
3-year term.
Yeah, and every board had an open seat on the ballot.
For last
And they
time.
filed with the clerk's office to run for the election. So I always, as well, keep a log of the disclosure forms. And as of today, when I was looking at this with all of these new elected officials, we'll have a much fuller list because they were required to do that when they applied at the clerk's office.
So, and so is that form, it resides with the clerk's office, and or but you shoot it over to Teresa so she's aware of it?
I haven't.
Right, we have it, and then I just collected at the get-go when we were required a year ago, last May.
Yeah.
That's when I first started and got involved in requesting them to disclose those forms. So I believe I was sending some to Amanda or you in the beginning.
And probably Amanda,
Probably
because
so.
it was included in the election packet sort of thing. But you can just send them to me.
Okay.
Amanda really doesn't.
So this February 15th doesn't really work for the LRSA board, it's really.
Correct, the terms would be based on the election.
And that's certification late April.
Correct.
But so if, let's assume April May 1st.
Right,
And so
so-
their first meeting though, didn't you say something about a lot of their meetings are early fall because?
Their meetings are usually April, May, so they can get their summer work done. They go do all their road work projects. They wrap it up. I give them all their budget monies available. They wrap it up the end of September or by mid-October.
So what do you think would be effective in terms of getting disclosures? Disclosures from LRSA people by May 15th?
Yes, that worked really well. I sent out an electronic email last May, and they responded pretty good, but it takes time to get them on board. And then I tried to send out reminders. I wasn't as successful in October as I was in May, I found. And still, a lot of the seniors, there's seniors up there doing this, they travel a lot. And so I'm always on trying to get all their paperwork in at intervals. Some boards are proactive where they all turn in their forms, and some they don't care, some just don't want to.
Well, but if they don't want to turn them in,
I know that's,
then, I mean, I could see potentially if somebody says they refuse to do it, where we could actually find them in violation.
correct, yeah,
And that's a nasty scene, which.
I know.
Have we seen that ever?
I have a
Partly
terrible
because we hadn't
email
pursued
that
it
the
as a-
mayor got about one of the road boards not wanting to file that disclosure form when he filed for election. It was Lloyd Andrews.
What was his reason?
Generally objected? Just objected. He's an oiler and he doesn't want his personal information out. So with somebody like that, and then they send a nasty letter, and they're, we've been working with them all these years, and then maybe he had a few too many drinks at night and got nasty and copied everybody. And it's like, okay.
Therese, I know that I haven't been sending you the ones that are coming in directly to the clerk's office,
Right.
but have you been sending me the ones that are coming in directly to you?
I did in the beginning, but I can go back and
Okay,
Send them off.
I felt like you were, but I just
Yeah.
couldn't picture that in my mind because it would be that I need to just get them before the Board of Ethics, but I
Correct.
thought that was the case, so.
yeah, and I need to make sure that we follow up and we both have
Right, right,
paperwork.
right. And I made a note for me to make sure I let you know when I get those
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah, this was my first go at this
Last year?
last May, yeah.
The reason I asked the question is because I'm aware of another owner of a company who's actually on the board in his LRSA and also owns the company that maintains it. And I've been waiting to watch the disclosure come through. And I've not seen it come in. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you the name of the disclosure.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Well, we do have one contractor who was also on the board who has recently sold his business.
that's a slightly different situation. Yeah.
And so now we have a new contractor doing the road maintenance and there's no conflict there, but we try to watch for that. Of course, they can see the loopholes and try to work around it. And nobody's enforcing it, so.
Well, maybe, Trish, you can help us, let us know when you see that kind of thing happening. Because either ethics board, municipal attorney, or ombudsman can file a complaint. And or, but I mean, obviously we would start informally, but
Right.
I don't know if you feel comfortable in that role, but it seems, I know Maury Robinson contacted all of us on that one sort of egregious situation.
Right.
And it took a year to 2 years to get it resolved, but I think now we have that down and that would go much more quickly. That it didn't need to take quite that long to, in fact, it resulted in some code changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That can be a positive then.
Yeah, no, it did. The ombudsman can file a
Mhm.
report, because we had someone file in that case, and then they withdrew when they realized they had to come forward.
Right.
So that took 3 to 4 months to just,
Right.
Until somebody else made the complaint.
Yeah, until another person
Yeah,
came
I
forward.
believe-
And that
Yeah,
and that
yes.
person ran for the
See,
board.
in the
won.
future, it could be the ombudsman or
Correct.
or the attorney's office.
Right.
So you could come to either one of us and say, hey, I think there's a problem.
Okay,
And then that office could investigate without any names being involved.
right.
So,
Well, then with the LRSA, it's egregious conflicts. It's not little conflicts. It's
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
pretty bad.
like personality conflicts.
Well, so does it make sense to have a, you think a deadline, May 15th, or well, I'll do my best, that that'll swoop up a certain amount of those 24.
Well, I think that's really good because every LRSA has a new board member and we can update them all at the same time. And I'm thinking most of the seniors who volunteer are here anyway, probably coming back after they've been traveling. They don't want to stay out longer than 3 months. They want their tax exemption. They want
Yep.
everything, so they have to come back. So that's probably a good time for the LRSAs.
Okay. Well, any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. You've been on our to-do list since last May.
Yeah.
And so
I'm
again, this
working
is
it.
Treese Williams, does all the LRSA stuff. Stephanie
Thank you,
McSwain.
Treese.
And you can imagine 44 boards, say on average of
I know.
8 to 10 members. I mean, 440 people she's got to
Well,
deal with.
that's what I was going to
That's a
ask. How
lot
many
of
members are
cats.
typically
That's a
on
lot.
these boards?
Like
Because you know,
400,
I mean, one thing I wonder. I mean, would it be possible to? Is it even like? Is it logistically plausible? The idea of like getting boards to meet together. So we do these ethics trainings.
Mhm.
It's 44 boards, but if you could even get just 2 boards at a time, that cuts it down to 22. Then if each member of the board could do even just 3 a year, we're hitting almost all of them each year.
Mhm.
That would be
Well,
pretty
and
nice. But are their
also-
schedules so disparate
they're-
that it would be like when you just sort of think, just eyeballing it, does that seem
I
like
mean,
something
they are
that-
all over the map, but
Mhm.
they might be willing to, you could
It's-
talk about that or sort of
It's
initiate
nice
that, I
to
don't
meet
know.
by board too, because they have similar issues, and the more experienced members can say, oh yeah, I remember when.
Right.
And so it's
That's
actually
true.
very helpful. Like at one point I said, well, maybe I can make this work if I only teach new board members. Well, but it really, each board has their own internal conflicts
Mhm.
that are helpful historically to have all the board there. You know,
Yeah,
and
I
maybe
can
after
see
the
that,
first year, if they
yeah.
didn't really want to come again or something, but.
Right. Yeah, I'm just trying to think about like,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
thank you for coming
making,
here.
making the number more
Contact me.
manageable. Yes, there's
Talk
44. It's
about
a
it.
lot of boards to get to, but 22, not so not so bad. But that's a good point.
I had everyone penciled in for entire city hall, you know, you guys are like, no. Thank you very much.
Well, that's how the university did its Title IX training last fall. It was sort of like every
Really?
faculty member had to go to the Wendy Williamson. It was
Oh,
like,
really?
like 200, 300 of
But
us
you
there.
had to cancel, you had to miss a meeting.
I had to
They
miss the
said
meeting. I
that.
had to miss a meeting
All right,
because of
thank
that.
you.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, okay, so those are those 2 things.
Anything to add before we go back and do those minutes?
I don't.
No.
Because we're probably going to revisit both of those subjects when we get to our
When we go
regular
through
order of the
yeah,
agenda.
right. Okay. Well, we have distributed the minutes from November 19th, 2014. I believe that we have the 3, at least a quorum of the 3 people from that meeting here from November. Have we had a chance to review it? Any changes anybody wants to make to those minutes?
For November 19th.
I can give everyone a quick minute to review.
Which,
See if we
November
can-
19th?
November 19th.
This is the one where you asked me to put a clerk's note in about the recommendation of the board, amending that recommendation. So if you'll specifically take a look at that and see if it meets what you were expecting.
Page 2.
Well, and I think I put it at every
Well, you
point
got
in the
several places
decision,
here.
yeah. I think there's 3 places.
Clerk's notes. Oh, is that why we held off on this for a while?
No.
No.
Well, because we ended up having to change what we were doing because
Right.
of the.
You reconsidered it and we brought
Right,
it back again.
Right.
Well, Mr. Chair, I recommend we approve the minutes of November 19th.
Second? I guess I can second it.
You can now,
Yeah.
since we changed. We look up the rules.
That's right. So, any opposition? No? All right, minutes are approved.
Yeah, I can't approve the minutes of March 11th, so.
No. So we'll have to continue the approval of those minutes to the next meeting. Okay, so, let's see, where are we with, what's our next business?
This is the item on the consent agenda that.
David, can
Yeah.
I just explain to you what happened last time in terms of the consent agenda?
Please.
Kathleen King sort of suggested this, and we thought maybe it'd be a good idea to try it. We have all of those disclosures that come up under new business every time, and then we go through and we're approving each type of disclosure as we go. And she just suggested that we make it all a consent agenda, go through the entire thing, and then at the end, we can just approve it in one fell sweep and approve all of it.
Rather than just going through each individual one together.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
And would we then review them right now as a group? Is that the concept?
Um,
Or
well-
prior to the meeting starting, or?
Well, generally, like the assembly does, they review the consent agenda, and then they'll draw certain things out for discussion, and they'll ask the body's approval to pull it out,
Right.
and then, and then they approve everything else.
And I'm not sure if that way will necessarily work for this board. I think that it might if you know I sent it out and people actually looked at it, but what I'm thinking is that because it's just the 5 items that we just pull as we go along.
Discouraged. I'm sensing a little.
No.
discouraged. There's a little tone
No.
I've noticed.
It's in her voice.
I know.
Okay, I'll try to control that.
So she
But-
advised.
Yeah, right.
that
That's
was
an
well
advantage.
done.
That's
Boy, you
right.
really you caught the conscience of the king there. That was good. That was.
I think for us it could work that we pull things as we go, you know, instead of knowing up front what we want to pull, and then we can approve the rest of the consent agenda. And if there are things that we still, you know, aren't going to approve, or we need more time for, or et cetera, then I'll make note of those to bring back.
So the idea is that we'll take a couple minutes right now for everybody to go through those disclosures and then pull those out, or something else?
But we just
I think that's the idea. So that we normally in a consent agenda, you do it ahead of time and you vote. The consent agenda is one motion. It's one motion to approve everything that's on the consent agenda. But members of the body can unilaterally pull out any item that they don't want just lumped in with this one vote.
I see.
And so usually you do that ahead of time, but we could do it, I think Lisa's right,
as
because
we
people
move
like
along.
Keith just don't read ahead of
I
time.
know.
And it's just, when he's
Talk
here, and so what we can.
You should talk.
I was being ironical. So what we could do is take a couple minutes, pull things
TK's
out.
heavy with her on.
And then instead of saying how now do we have a motion to approve the gifts? Okay, now do we have a motion from elected officials? Just pull things out and then
We're
vote on
done.
everything else all at once.
Right.
Okay, so.
I know for the gifts they're using the correct form.
Well, every single one of those, I sent a letter to asking them to submit the correct form.
Oh, okay.
And you'll be,
I was impressed.
yeah, they sent them back in, and I actually had one AA call me, one that, the Bowman, the one that we had the most from, and AA called me and she said, okay, can we just go through this one by one? She goes, well, now we have the right form. She goes, so on this one, and then by the time we got, maybe halfway there, she goes, oh, so we don't even need to resubmit this one. Oh, so this one falls under, so she got it, you know what I mean? So then a few days later, I saw the ones that needed to ask for the exception. I saw those forms come back in. So that was good. And then I had an email from Lisa Huffman, who was at Sand Lake, and that's how I knew how to proceed with the Christie one. And she sent them all in on the new form. So I think
she
it was
resubmitted
worth,
that one?
yes.
Okay.
I think it was worth the labor, because it was a lot of labor to do that, but it was worth it because there was some education took place. So.
You know, what's too bad, and I know the school district will not agree to this, but when they do their training of the principals in July, if they would let one of us do the training session on the gifts, and I mean, it would take 15 minutes, but remember, they were so resistant last time around on all of this.
Well, we're so boring. He didn't want to.
So.
I think before the disclosure, we have Glenda, was going to find out who the ethics
Right.
officer is.
There was a
Do you
couple
have
little
any-
homework items from the last meeting.
It's on-
One
it's on the
was-
agenda.
Right.
Right.
I verified that he is. So I called and checked with ASD, and Todd Hess is the designated ethics officer for the school district. So if there was going to be any issues that that the board wishes to, I guess, kick over to ASD for thought, deliberation, whatever, that he is the point person for those
Okay.
issues.
Now, is he the point person to make sure that the principals are looking at the forms as well?
Well, is that the role of the designated ethics officer?
I
would
don't
say
know.
yes.
I'm sure he is part of the training for them,
Yes.
yeah.
'Cause
But I think what you had hoped was that some of these forms would go either to the principal or the designated ethics officer. So
Or
is that what you
Todd.
imagined, that all of those would go to Todd instead of our board?
Well,
Right.
yes, he has his
Yes.
own role. It could
Okay.
be either the board or the ethics officer. So Todd could be involved in.
'cause I think that was our intent, was that, well,
Right,
make their
first
own
the
decision.
principals, but,
Right.
you know, in lieu of the principals, it could go to the ethics officer. It's possible that a teacher may not want to let her principal know, his or her principal know what's going on, so that she could send it to Todd. Knowing personalities involved, I think I'd rather send it to the principal.
Doesn't the form require it to be the designated ethics officer or the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
It
So
doesn't
the
even
principal
mention
doesn't
the
have the
principal.
authority to do
Right.
it.
You know, but what's interesting about this is theoretically, this person, Todd or ourselves, we look at it regarding, does it raise any issues concerned regarding public policy limitations on gifts, including influence, appearance of influence, and conflict of interest? So Todd gets one for 250, what does he do with that? Oh geez, I think that's fine. I mean, you know, so what if I'm not sure that our system that we've set up is that practical, other than we've educated teachers to be considerate of this, and maybe to Todd saying, hey, you know, be realistic. I mean, he'll probably let all the $75 ones go. But, you know, if it's 250 or 1,000, hopefully you're gonna do something about it. I guess we've already amended the code, just do we come back with something that, then he has a report that he has to do for us or something. I mean, it's sort of interesting, we're letting the, what's his name, the something of the hen house, the fox guard, the hen house or something. I mean, it was someone who wasn't particularly strong on this to begin with. But having said that, they've come here, so we can say something about them.
Let me tell you too, just to set the scene for this. The last board meeting, the board went over these disclosures in just a long time, and made a decision on each and every one of them. But the ones that were on the wrong form, even though I had the decision of the board, I went ahead and sent out the letter saying submit this on the right form. So when they came back, some of the ones that the board said, it's okay, you didn't even have to submit. You know, I sent another letter back, and I just said, you know, thank you for submitting on the right form. However, this falls under AMC blah 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 blah. So you do not need to ask for an exception or disclose this gift in the future. Blah blah blah, and sent it back to them. So, and then like I said, some people called in and said, oh, they you know, okay, only sent back the ones they needed to. So what's in here may look like repeats, but I put the repeats that weren't A-OK because Glenda has something that she would like to talk to the board about.
There were two disclosure forms that I was asked to gather additional information on, because either the disclosure wasn't clear, or we couldn't quite tell what exactly the person was disclosing. The first one I'll start with is Mr. Stagg, Robert Stagg.
He's a popular.
Right.
He's got two there.
He was an exceedingly nice and accommodating teacher, and we had a very good conversation. He did report, and he got kudos from me for using the correct form. But beyond that, it was all bad news.
Okay.
He did explain. I asked him, I said, well, because what he got, so if you'll read it, he got gift cards to Joann's. These were group gifts, both of them. There were two, they were group gifts, large dollar amounts. And I asked him if he had already used the gift cards, and he said, well, of course I used them. I bought sewing machines with them. And I said, well, were you aware that the code, the form says you're not to use it until you've been been given authorization, or you've been told it's an acceptable gift? And he said, no, I thought because I just disclosed it, it was fine.
Mhm.
So typical, which is, I know, common theme. I disclosed it, therefore everything's all good. That's the way. Anyway, he and I had a very lengthy conversation, and he has a much better understanding now. But he was very nice.
But one of the questions we had was, were they for sewing machines for the classroom?
Yes, so he ended up buying 2 sewing machines with the 2 cards that were given. He bought one was, I guess, a lower grade, and one was a more heavy-duty machine. He donated one to the school to a different teacher, and he is using the other one in his classroom. He's in charge of, he said, 5th and 6th grade after-school care, and they do tons and tons of like craft projects, things like that, and they go through a lot of machines.
You know, if he had said that on here, that he's using it in his classroom, we probably wouldn't have had any questions.
Well, on the form, he just reported the gift cards.
Yeah.
They hadn't been used yet. So he used them, and that's what he did with them, and he was very apologetic and said that he fully understood what the code was trying to do. And so anyway, he bought the machines, and they're part of the school now. So.
Well, and I think we didn't have a problem with the one that said that it was from classroom parents, the 252.
Right.
But he disclosed the second one for 250 that said it was from the Martins family.
Right, and I asked him about that, and he said those were from he had taught these individuals. They have twin sons and another son, and it was from that one family.
So that was the one that gave
was a
people
bigger
problems.
problem. So he took, and that was the one that he bought the heavy duty machine with, that he has now donated to the school. Right.
So I think that
have
has
been
to be a
used-
decision, because
Right.
even Bill said last time, if he had just lumped it all together into one disclosure,
Right.
it would have just passed without,
Right.
even a second thought.
Right.
But the fact that he
Should be independent
isolated
gifts,
the one
Right.
family,
Right.
What was the decision at the last meeting?
There was
Just send them a
not.
there was no
letter.
because
decision
we
on this
couldn't-
one.
There was questions about getting additional
Okay.
information.
Well, if he used them for personal use, we'd have one decision. But if he donated it to the school, my personal feeling is that it would, in practice, that it would stay, that we would approve this.
Terry?
Well, I think the worry we had about that kind of stuff is that because the gift is not anonymous,
Mhm.
right? There's still that
There's still the
potential
perception.
downstream effect, right?
Yeah.
There's still the
Well,
potential
I-
that this family made a very large gift to this teacher, and it's true it goes. The teacher
After
doesn't use it for their
school.
personal use, but does use it
Yeah.
for their
Mhm.
job use.
Right.
So they are using it.
Right. The school itself, even if the individual teacher
Mhm.
didn't benefit from it, the school benefited from the violation.
Right.
Again, and that's right. I mean, it's
Right.
it's the fact that the gift's not anonymous
Sure.
that's the potential sticking point.
Well, yeah, and I said what I said, and what I didn't say is when they should have gone to the principal or to the PTA, so that they could remain anonymous. But
Yeah,
that's
that
a matter
would've
of
been-
trying to train the parents.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Well,
Go
the
ahead.
bell rang on this
Yeah,
one.
I was just
mean,
gonna say,
at this
we-
point, I think
Yeah.
what's done is done, and the reality of it is, I think.
We're not gonna force them to return it.
Right, and so.
It's Katie bar the door.
Maybe not. I have more things to say.
Yeah.
Let me pace myself.
I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but
It just sounds-
it sounds great, doesn't it?
A Katie bar? Well, you weren't raised on a farm.
She kicks into that southern accent.
Yeah, I like that very
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess a nasty letter saying
We send a
you
letter.
really shouldn't have done this.
And then
We're
not-
aware of what you've done. You're sort of the
yeah,
actions
I
you've
think that's-
taken, and now that's well.
So we can
but in
send
the
the letter,
future,
and we've spoken to him too, so
I have.
he knows, and so we can send the letter but not force him to return it.
right?
Well,
And corrective in the future. Please be aware that this is the form you should be using. And I will tell you this: I went to the ASD website. They have an ethics handbook on their website that was updated less than a year ago.
Well, clearly he's not reading these really
No,
carefully. So
no.
whether it's in that or in here,
Right.
even above the signature.
Right.
Okay.
Well, again, I mean, and I wonder if this is another I do hate to pile on the work for this board, but Dee's got a really good point that there's an important part of this board's mission, which is educational.
Right.
And by and large, that is one area we have not really done a whole lot. I mean, we've gotten sort of overwhelmed with the amount of sort of adjudicatory stuff that we're doing. But that really isn't important. I mean, I do think that for when the school board is doing its trainings, we should be trying to farm ourselves out there, trying to get ourselves out. Because clearly, this is a case where whatever training this teacher got, it didn't work, right? In many ways, just like
Could have been
basic.
outdated, could
Yeah,
have
if
been
you
years
look at
That's
the
right.
ethics
ago.
code, it doesn't have the gift correctly at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, so there's basic stuff. Just the idea that if I disclose it, it must have been okay, right?
That's
I
what
mean,
it
like
says.
there's
Oh
just,
yeah,
there's
that's
just
the
basic,
cure.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the panacea. Here we go. I've told you about it. So even though it's clearly beyond the the amount that's
Right.
allowed, the disclosure creates the exception,
Right.
and I think that's just a huge
Of course,
misperception.
you missed last meeting where we
He's a
got
nice guy.
copies of
I'm sure
ethics
he
to
is.
union leaders, because we're working on creating that thing.
I just read I read that in the
minute.
minutes. Yeah,
So-
you guys didn't like it, did you?
For him, I think one was fine.
That's true.
The group, the other was from those people in
Right.
maybe a letter just saying,
Just a letter.
we understand the facts are this.
Can I start it and send
Sure.
it to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
the
do you think
oth-
a letter is even necessary? I mean, you've already talked to them.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
do.
we should have it in writing.
It's nice to get closure. The other one I was asked to look into is Christy Mayhew. She's the very first one.
She's not. I didn't repeat it for everybody else.
Oh, she's not.
Because you had a note on
Oh.
it. I've already
Oh,
sent
I'm
it
sorry.
off to her and said,
Oh, yeah. So this was just a question about, because it looked like it was from one parent,
Mhm.
but it was actually the room mother organized. She was the one who organized the gift, but it was from the entire
So
class.
you did not send the letter?
I sent the letter saying it was okay
Okay.
to accept it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And I talked to her about the form being on the old form and referred her to the
And she sent me a new
ASD
form.
website. She was very nice too, very interested in helping.
So what about the remaining? Then were decisions made at the last meeting on the rest of them?
No.
Well,
This is
this
the
is
last
another thing where
Harvey's story here.
Glenda is
So-
going to elaborate, beginning with Christina Fernandez and her conversation with the state of Alaska.
Right. So I decided to, because after I discovered who the designated ethics officer was for ASD and decided that that person really could be doing some of this lifting so the board can do other more monumental things like education and things like that. And I did this just purely in my own spare time.
Can I stop you a minute, Glenda? I just want to set this up to where what they did with the ones that were over $50
Oh, yeah, yeah.
last time was if it was over 50, it's $65, you make a $15 donation to the PTA. That's how they resolved every single one
Over
of these type of
$50.
letters. It was $80, well, $30 to the PTA. So that was their choice, either return it or donate the
Right.
excess. So, now.
So I thought about that a lot. And the lawyer in me decided that we shouldn't be inventing this wheel. So I contacted the state. The state has gift disclosure issues as well. They have to have figured this out.
Yes.
So what did they do? Wonderful. There's one guy. He seemed very lonely. Sitting in his office all by his little self. No windows and lots of books. Anyway, happy to talk to somebody. His name's John Woodman. He was a really, really nice guy. You guys know him?
I was about to say. Wonder if it's John Woodman.
It's John Woodman. He was actually
He is a lovely
extremely
guy. Yeah.
Do we know
lovely,
John Woodman?
helpful.
Cheryl works with him over
Okay.
in the state.
I don't know.
But so I don't know if you know. You
Really
might
nice
not know.
guy.
Yeah.
We just talked on the phone, but
Okay.
he spent probably 45 minutes talking with me
Sure.
about, he deals with a lot of other stuff, but strictly with respect to gifts, okay? So the state has, the state of Alaska, Department of Law, ethics stuff, they do the smiley face or sad face stuff.
Oh, this
Right.
is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
And they have an
Yes.
improper gift section. Their dollar amount's different than ours, so I'll put that out there.
By the way, Dave, you weren't here last time, right? I
Mhm.
gave this out to everybody.
Okay, gotcha.
So I called him and I said, look, this board deals a lot with gift disclosures, and there's a lot of situations where it's a gift that's in excess of the allowable amount. And, what's the cure? And what do you do in this situation? What does the state do in this situation? And I explained to him the proposal that the board came up with last time was, if it's $50 is the what max you can get, and you get an $80 gift card, you keep 50 and give 30 to whoever. And he had a lot of concerns about that.
Mhm.
And they were the same as mine,
Mhm.
and that is that you're basically condoning the
Mhm.
continuance of an unacceptable dollar amount
Mhm.
gift,
That's right.
and an entity, whether it's the school or the PTA, is still benefiting
Mhm.
from the violation.
Mhm.
And that's the heartburn that the lawyers in the group seem to have over this. So for them, they don't give options like that.
Mhm.
You return the gift.
Mhm.
Well, it's still a
Yeah,
confidentiality
period.
issue.
That's right.
Right.
They know who gave you the $80 gift.
That's
Right.
right.
I understand, but in their particular case, they're not dealing with, the school, the state is not dealing with parents.
No, they're not. And he and I talked about
you're,
that.
And you're having to tell parents that, oh, you know, I'm gonna have to give back your money, as opposed to the money is still benefiting the school if it goes to the PTA. And that doesn't, and there's not the undue influence.
Then the parent can give the gift to the school instead of the individual teacher.
I know, but you're
PTA.
still dealing with the parents. I think the parents, you could actually get their, well, I've seen a couple of the parents I've talked to who are like, well, who the hell are you to tell me that, you know, what I can, you know, how much I can give? Well, you
They're
can give
not.
a lot, but you have to give it to the right person.
The municipality is the one who actually tells them. And the school and the PTA, those groups can still benefit from from parents providing gifts, but to give it to the individual teacher is where the problem breaks down. It's no different than another public employee receiving a gift. He most of the cases he deals with are the governor, lieutenant governor receiving gifts from dignitaries in
Right,
foreign
right.
countries, things like that. And they have to return gifts sometimes, and it does present an awkward situation. But if it's awkward, then the gift giver should be in the position of knowing that, why am I doing this? Am I attempting to exert undue influence
That's right.
here?
Because
And
if they're not, and if their intentions are
Pure.
then it wouldn't matter whether they give it to the PTA or not.
exactly. So he does not, they do not engage in the carving out of
There's
the
really no
dollar
debate.
amount.
Yeah.
He said, you're getting so deep in the weeds, your board's gonna bog down quickly. And his recommendation was, take all those disclosure forms, kick them over to the designated ethics officer, let your board deal with the loftier, weightier issues, you know, requests for advisory opinions,
Mhm.
NOPVs, education, and that sort of stuff. And deal with these strictly when like a big thorny one comes in that's deserving of a lot of attention. But it's it's return the gift,
Mhm.
you know, or
That makes sense to me.
he had very grave concerns about getting that far in the weeds on stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying I'm opposed to doing that, but that means you have to give very, very specific instructions to the designated ethics officer.
Okay.
Well,
So that if something does come in that's a large thorny one, like a $2,000 gift for somebody, then then it is something that would bounce past that person to us if they don't want to deal with it, as opposed to just being hidden.
Well, my concern is when the ASD ethics officer simply says, well, okay to all of these, and a $1,000 one, yeah, that doesn't sound so good.
I know. Box in the house.
Yeah, and or whether he has the authority, would maybe a middle ground is he has the authority to tell the parent, you know, or the recipient that these can be turned, the whole thing gets turned over to the school, rather than rejecting the gift, versus that splitting business.
Well, who's the check and balance on that? On the ASD ethics? There's gotta be.
I guess we're it. right?
We're
It's
it?
us,
Is
yeah.
it this? Is it the
Although
board?
we didn't really set ourselves up in a checks and balances system with respect to this. I don't think he views himself as an active ethics officer anyway, so I think these are gonna continue to come to us.
Well, he was
Correct.
very
Correct.
difficult to deal with when we did the negotiations on making the change. I mean, you had to see him in the room. It was.
Here, that reminded, yeah,
Well, do we wanna invite him like you invited these guys?
Todd Hess, that's right, I remember him now. Yeah, he
At
came to the.
any rate, if we did that, I think we had to be very, very specific.
Mhm.
Of course, we don't know who's going to be here after the change in administration. Is Mike Gavis still going to be over there? Is he going to move back over here?
Well, I mean, I suppose, one thing I don't mind us doing these in the sense that I think we have streamlined the process. You know, we've got the form letter now. Maybe the form letter needs to be tweaked or amended a little bit about, you know, having a little bit of a okay, so you've already accepted this gift. What do you do now? And offer some strategies, you know, and I think it could be a helpful letter in the sense of like, you know, if we as a board we want to say to these people, give the gift back, it might also be helpful. Here are some things you can tell the parent who might be offended. Give the gift to the PTA, or gather together with other parents and make it a classroom-wide gift. You know, just offer some strategy so that the teacher sort of like has some way to allow the parent to save face, so it's not just sort of like throwing it back back at them.
Right.
But I'm inclined to do, you know, I'm at least inclined to do it that way. You know, I suppose we can wait to the next meeting when we have Bill and Kathleen back to vote on it. But I am inclined. I too don't like the idea of saying just lop off the top and send it to the PTA. At least if the idea is to, you know, if the idea is the concern about undue influence, then you know you can't unring the bell at that point. You know, the gift has been made, and to the degree that the teacher keeps any portion of it, plus the rest goes to a benefit for the teacher's school anyway.
Right.
You're going to wind up with that influence, or at least
Sure.
the appearance of that influence. Actually, you'll probably wind up just with that, with both.
And there was a letter that Lisa had started, and she sent me the draft, and it was a response letter to one of these, and it included, hey, here's the following options. And that's when I just cut a lot of that stuff out and said, one of the options was lop off 20, give that here, and I just really think that we don't.
What was that
get
school
into
district in East that just flat said no more, period?
That was the one. It was Boston, wasn't it? I think it was Boston. Yeah, I'm telling you, and
No more
you can
gifts.
see the merits of it. No gifts.
I
Gone.
don't, yeah.
You know, and you can see the merits of it.
I
Because, you
can.
know, to the degree that you say it's this amount, well, it's for how many people for this amount, and you know, what if it's, you know, I've got 4 of their kids, can it now be a $200 gift card? It's,
Well, I'm
Sounds
a
familiar.
parent that gives $50 gifts because that's the limit, but I'm educated about what the limit is. A lot of parents
Right.
aren't and haven't
Right.
been by the school district because we asked the school district not just to educate the teachers, but the parents, send something home in a newsletter. But if the idea is undue influence, is a $40 gift influential? Is a $20 gift influential?
what
Is
we
any
thought.
gift influential? And so it's almost like the consideration of the Boston thing, you know, maybe all gifts should be anonymously routed through the PTA to the teacher to just eliminate any influence whatsoever. If that's not the case, then I think it goes back to education. I mean, that's where the ball has dropped, because as a parent, I know what the limit is, you know, and so I stay within the limit. I don't try to sneak in $55, you know. So it helps the parent, so they're not in a position where somebody, here's your mantle clock, you know, take it back. You know,
yeah, I read a book on this stuff over spring break. I'll send you guys. I'll copy a chapter of it. The social scientific research on this stuff is amazing. In medical circles, the pharmaceutical companies, stuff as cheap and as simple as pens and notepads and stuff like that. Yet
The effect.
it adds up. It actually does have a measurable influence on the way people think about that product.
Right.
Just for the cheapy little gift. So in some sense, any gift really does have an influence.
I'm
And
gonna
to
make
make
it-
it worse, we are terrible judges of our own biases from physicians routinely say, I'm a scientist, I'm trained, I'm objective, I would never let these gifts affect my prescribing habits. What are you accusing me of? Da, 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 da. But then when we
But
go
when
and we
you look
measure
at
their
your
prescribing
prescribing
habits, it
habits,
changes.
wow.
I'm going to make a
Yeah.
confession. My kids' grades are my kids' grades. I would never expect anything I gave a teacher to influence their grades. If they're not doing the work, they're not doing the work. You know, the hammer comes down however it does at home. But I want the teachers to like my kid. And that just might be my motivation right there. Oh, are we going to get your teachers a gift? Yeah, we're going to get the teacher. Because I want them to like them. I don't think it goes so far as I want them to give them a good grade, unmerited. No, but does that unconsciously affect that? Perhaps.
Or think about it the other way, and I think, some parents probably do feel like, if I'm not giving a gift and most of the other parents in this classroom are,
Right.
then is my child suffering by comparison? which would affect ultimately their grades, right? I mean, there's just no separate. I mean, like the person's emotional
only trying to
perception
keep up.
of a person,
Right.
yeah, of their students.
Right.
We know that affects their grade. There's no sense in like trying to pretend that's not the case. And the question is sort of like, what can we do to sort of limit those undue influences? And this is a clear case where we can. So yeah, I think the Boston thing that was probably the right way to go at the end of the day.
We tried.
Yeah, we couldn't
Yeah,
convince
we
anyone
couldn't
else,
get-
but I think that was the right way to go.
We tried.
Didn't you put that in your compass piece?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was all in there.
Can I buy a drink?
Okay, so what are we doing with Ms. Fernandez? Did you say you spoke with her?
No, not on this one. I spoke to Miss Mayhew
Okay.
and Mr. Stagg.
All right, so,
This was the one that Lisa had begun drafting a letter
Okay.
that said, you can keep 80, but you gotta give 30, and
Okay.
I got the draft and went,
I
and then I
proposed
called
cutting out-
John Wood, yeah, and then this is where we are right now.
Are we
Okay.
gonna wait on all of those sort of like excess donations until the complete
Kathleen
board
and
next
Bill.
week? Or next month? Next month?
So the next month, so the remaining of these, we want to
No,
wait until.
that's not. Okay, that one is, Laura Rund is an excess, a $25 excess. We
Yes.
talked about Robert Stagg
Yes.
for both of his. Tina
Atkin?
Kakin,
That to me, oh, go ahead. There were a lot of.
oh,
random
she's a
things.
new one. She's a new one, no.
Because I see a
Oh,
$50 gift card,
form, and
but there's a
it's-
lot of
Oh, this,
hand soap, six-pack Dr. Pepper.
Well, but it's anything in excess of the $50 gift card, though.
no, this one was acceptable because they said $50 and the rest was
Plus
perishable
consumables?
Yeah,
stuff.
perishable
Yeah.
stuff.
So that wasn't one of them.
So that's a good one.
We got this one from
So-
Sarah Lon Roberts.
That's a donate $50 one. So that's one we're gonna
And
hold
who's-
on.
Who's, I can't, Matt, somebody approved it? Is that a principal?
Yeah.
What's a $50 one? Sarah Long Roberts?
Well, that's
Um,
one she'd have to donate.
donate
$50.
$50.
Yeah, we're not, yeah.
Okay. So I guess we are holding on the rest of them for the board's.
Somebody did
Discussion.
sign that, though.
Why do we
Signature
have
of
to-
approval.
Why do we have to, why do we have to wait?
Oh,
for-
Matt Lang is her principal.
Oh, but he doesn't have authority.
Yeah, but he doesn't, yeah.
Why do we have to wait? I guess I'm missing what we did last
Oh,
meeting.
we don't.
Why
I
can't-
thought you wanted to wait.
Why can't we just send out the letters to those that are open?
Okay. So make
Well,
a decision to
the only reason I
return?
was thinking that we
Yeah.
might wait is if we just wanted to have Bill and Kathleen's input on the question of whether we tell these people, give the gift back, or whether you can do
Right.
the lop-off
I see.
thing.
Right.
You know, it sounds like weird, but it sounds like maybe they thought that was a good idea, and so.
I agree with you. I don't think it's a good idea, lop off. To me, that's kind of a violation of the spirit of the whole point. To me, so the concept here is this gift card, assuming she hasn't used it yet, she would have to return it. Is that what we're saying?
Right. So the letter, the proposed
Yeah.
letter would have, thank you for your disclosure form.
Right.
You've reflected that, you've been given a gift in excess of the $50 amount. Your options are, boom, boom.
And what are the options?
What are the options? And that was the discussion that was the
I
last one
see.
with Bill and
Okay.
Kathleen was, well, there's,
I see.
how
Is
many
that-
different ways can we skin the cat? And so we
Okay.
put all these options together. And then when I got the draft, I began
I
looking
see.
at it and
Yeah.
I just,
So right now, it's you have to return it.
Well, their decision was to
Add these other options.
take the excess
Okay, well, maybe
and.
we want to wait for them to come back and so we can debate with them before we because we have.
right.
So
I mean,
we're
they
not
were
just like
part of the
wobbling
back and
initial,
forth, back and
they were
forth.
part of
When
the
is the
initial
end of school?
discussion, and they
Yeah.
may have
Okay.
other ideas.
Okay.
They may be able to draw from other experiences.
Week of May.
All right, then let's continue the rest of these then that we haven't discussed
Yeah,
until
what
they get
about
back, so we
teacher
can then
who
convince
can't
them
even
that it's not a good
spell
idea to
word
have
for-
those exceptions.
Okay,
Or
so
at least
that's,
have a vote
all
on
of them
it.
in here are ones that have excess.
Right.
So, being that this end of school is coming up,
Mhm.
do you all want to make a decision? Or do you still want to wait until
Well, see,
the second
they'll be
weekend?
back a week before our meeting, will probably be a week before the end of school, so it's do or die time. This is to me also though an educational year where we're trying to figure out this
Mhm.
excess too. I guess, well, sort of, I thought, let's be practical, if they're like these 50 or 80, if they're $80, is that something we were gonna try to jump in the fray and almost have to do it
Mhm.
today? Versus a $250 one,
Mhm.
hey, come on, the real excess ones is are there, and I'm not looking at them right in front of me, are there ones that are well, remember at one point we were like allowing things between 50 and 100 to sort of go as
Right.
probably not worth the administrative time. Are the ones over $100 here? That where we should send a letter, I mean, they clearly are inappropriate. Or
All of them are in that weird
No,
little
they're all in
between,
the range.
yeah, 10 and
Because other than
15
these,
and
other
50.
than these two sewing machines, they're,
Yeah, let's see, well, this one's 100. Right,
Well, that's that
or so
50
gift card's
range,
$100,
yeah.
yeah, that's,
So that one
Fernandez
should
is,
be a return, I think.
Fernandez is 80,
And so can Fernandez. That's a good
and
point.
Lauren Rund is 75.
Laura Rund is the perishable?
No,
that's
That's
a
the
gift
Old
card,
Navy
too.
gift card.
Old Navy.
Oh, yeah. And that, is that one Van
That's it.
Lee or Van?
And you know, that seems very personal, you're probably not giving it to Old Navy to benefit
No.
the classroom.
No.
I mean, I do the same thing as Lisa, I give exactly the right amount for kids. But the idea is, to me, is for replenishing supplies.
Mhm.
You know, because I put a lot of teachers into bankruptcy, and when you're making $2,000 a month, and you're paying for
Mhm.
supplies, and you're paying back student loans,
Mhm.
I feel total sympathy for the teachers.
Well, I don't know. So each one of these is a gift card.
So those are personal. They
yeah,
cost-
Orso's,
they're not-
DAP,
they're
right,
not
they're
to
not.
help the
yeah, Orso's
They're
hard
not.
to use for the classroom.
Yeah, that's, you're right. Once you're taking the kids out for dinner.
Well, there was one that
Either
they
we have
said
an
if,
ethics
if
policy,
they
we
do the
don't.
pizza party,
Yeah,
remember?
you know, I don't know. I leave it up to you guys because I wasn't here last week. But I tend to my idea is just to send out the letter. You got to return those gift cards.
For the gift card ones.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any others besides
Well,
those
this
three
gift card's
cards?
received on December 19th.
Yeah.
So it's been used. already.
Yeah, it's gone.
Well, but
If you've
how do
used
we
it-
start enforcing this rule? I mean, how do we?
I know,
yeah.
that is a
If
problem.
it's-
I'm not,
I can't assume it's gone. If it's gone, then they have violated the policy.
Right.
And that's not for me to speculate on whether they violated it or not. We have to follow our rules. That's kind of my take on it. If we're going to follow them, we got to follow them, and we got to tell them to give it back. And if they haven't, if they've already used it, then I have no control over that at this point. Anyway.
Well, and that they may go to their principal or talk to 5
Yeah.
other teachers, and it starts a little swell
That's right.
saying, "Wait a minute,
Yeah,
there's a
don't go
problem."
spend these. And they
Yeah.
probably had a Christmas
you know,
dinner
dear,
at Orso's. That's fine. But we got to send out the letter at least
Yeah, can I give
complying
you a
with the rules.
suggestion?
Maybe they will want then the designated ethics officer for
I was
ASD to
gonna
handle
say,
all these in the future.
Maybe, well, no, but, no, see, I
Well,
don't, but
and
how
that's the
about,
problem because he was not. I remember he was
Not helpful.
not helpful. at
how
all.
about a copy of these three, though, go to him?
Yes.
Okay.
So anytime we do this, say, because that's gonna get him going. That's gonna
Well,
get
we've
him
got
riled up.
CC Ed Graff, which I haven't.
No, it
We
should
should do
be Ed.
CC Todd Hess.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Do
here-
both.
And this would be my take on it too. I know that I don't mean to cut out the other members who were discussing this last week, but to me that's almost like discussing kind of a variance from what the very specific rule is. If we want to discuss that at a later date, we can do it, but we can still make this decision today based on these particular disclosures on these gift cards. That's my take.
And it's the end of the school year.
Right.
And it's in the school year.
We just don't have a choice.
Let's just get these out.
Okay.
And the
But-
letter can have, I mean, you can highlight in the letter, the big bold reminder, you were not to use
That's
this.
right.
Here it is, right here on this form. You were instructed not to
That's right.
use this gift. If you have used this gift,
That's right.
then you've already gone one
That's
step
right.
too far.
That would,
Okay.
and then, now, the question to me is, since we know that Mr. Hess has never been cooperative with us, do we CC anybody else?
The question is the school board, I guess. I think Ed is too busy with doing every other thing in the world, and then
Or
you've got
Abbott?
Todd.
I don't know. I don't have an opinion
I
on
don't,
that.
you know, the school board breaks down into different roles, though. People who, like, they have different
Mhm.
committees, and I don't know who their committee
kind of like the
person was.
assembly does.
Yeah.
Do they
And
have a-
that, you know, that person, the one who was running Tam Agnosti or something?
Oh,
Yeah.
Agnosti Kiesler.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
she was really pleased with us last
Agnosti.
year, this gift, right? Because she
Yeah.
said, you guys need to deal with these 4 things, and 1, 2, 3, 4 modifications in the code, and she said, thank you so much. I
Mhm.
mean, and they were all good, well
Well,
taken
she showed to the
points.
meeting at the school district too.
Mhm.
We had a couple
So she
school
might be a
board members.
friendly face, but I don't know if they break down,
Differently.
and then that gentleman, well, I had contact with Cameron.
Cameron.
Yeah.
I had contact with him, so he must have something to do with the ethics thing too.
Mhm.
Okay.
Can you figure that out, Lisa?
Yes, I will.
I think
Okay.
it might be him. It may be him,
Okay.
because I remember I had to deal with him before intermediary to the board. So I bet you it is him. And so, yeah, it would be, let's give copies.
Okay.
Okay,
How do you feel about this?
yeah.
And we're not
I'm
doing
comfortable
motions on
with
all
it.
these things, right? Because it's all consent. But are we ready to move on? Or does anybody have an objection to doing it this way for right now? Like I say, I don't mean to cut out the whole discussion, but maybe we can take up the discussion later and at least get these through.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my
Well, I
thing.
appreciate you chasing down the guy from the state, Glenn, because that does actually help. You know, how somebody else does it.
Well,
isn't
it's
this
nice
like-
to have consistency. You
Isn't
don't
it?
want to have these wild variations in the way the state or the municipality is
You know,
conducting business.
this reminds me, now that I have young children at home, this happens all the time. When you start expanding
But
on
Mom
rules,
said-
and if you're not clear in this, and then, man, they come in and woof, they will swoop in and take advantage of that variation.
Little negotiators.
Oh, man.
I know
especially-
it.
Yes, so this is no different to the extent that when we start, okay, well, here are your multitude of options of what to do now. When do we start watering down our own rule?
Right.
I don't know, we have to be very careful before we start doing that. That would be my take on it.
Which is also the law. I mean,
That's
Well,
right.
it is the law, right?
It's the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
it's not ours to vary it.
Yeah.
No, and this is the one we pushed for. Okay, so can we move on?
Yeah, that's why I don't give Elias any gifts.
Nothing. No, that's right.
Okay,
That's
just-
right. Okay, so what's next on the agenda then?
There are no gifts by elected, there are no conflicts of interest.
Okay,
So we're on to present.
Let's see. The disclosure form, present economic interests. Are we on to Terry's letter to Jay Miller?
Yes. And Terry had written a letter and Dee was going to review and edit it,
I saw it in there somewhere. It's under one of
We
these
did that?
orange
but
pads.
I don't think you have Dee, because this is still Terry's letter.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you want to
Okay,
just?
I saw
this
it,
is-
but
Which
I
tab
didn't-
is it in? 7? Oh, the
It's
first
under
one.
present economic interest.
Terry, can you please refresh my recollection? What's the basis of this letter?
The problem was that Mr. Miller said, and he had a clear potential conflict, and said, the way I'm going to handle this is whenever this issue comes up involving my personal interest,
That's
I'll
right.
disclose it to
I'll
the
just-
commission, right? And it had this sort of like, it
Yeah.
sounded all the world like, and disclosure is enough.
Right.
And so the
Right,
point of the
right.
letter, and it was to start, and maybe use this one as a template to send out to boards more generally,
Yes.
was to say disclosure is not enough, that's just the open and move and a series of things that needs to happen.
Okay.
Lisa, can I ask you, do you have the original disclosure?
Yes, I do. I don't think I kept it in yours.
Okay, because what I'm wondering about is, because I get nothing done without Glenda's assistance, is if Glenda and I meet on this to develop more of a template, because Terry, I remember when I first read this, I said, oh, wait a minute, I think this is backwards in some step, or
Conflict
that there was a
And you
problem.
thought there was some stuff that really wasn't
Wasn't true,
required by
yeah.
by the
Yeah.
code. So I had added,
Do you
you know,
want to-
the idea that, you know, he should recuse himself,
Yeah,
so
maybe,
and which is not the way, say, the legislature or the assembly does it. So that's sort of like the debate we were having, should boards run in a slightly different way?
should
say,
recuse
from the
yourself.
assembly. You
So-
should recuse. So the way I
I
the way I
see.
envision is that you really shouldn't be operating with a conflict. So your first
Right.
test is, if it's clear to you that there's a conflict, recuse yourself. Secondly, if you're sort of like, you know, this could meet the standards, then you need to disclose it, and then let your board decide. But
I
the
see.
board should decide, and that was part of the problem you had with that commission years ago, is that disclosures was being made, but then the board wouldn't ever decide
Right.
what, you know, if there was in fact a conflict or not. And so the idea is that you should be taking action, and potentially your board should be taking action,
Yeah.
and then just trying to lay those steps out. But at any rate, getting beyond the idea that disclosure is
Right.
enough.
Okay,
right?
that may. Did you want to take a look at this?
yeah.
Again?
Why don't we just do it?
Right
I mean,
now?
not a second, no,
No, but
but, can we get a copy of that, or take that one?
You can take that one.
Okay.
so do we
And
want to
then-
continue this the
and
next
take that?
meeting, or
Yeah,
do we
yes,
want
so
to?
we'll just
okay.
do it.
And Dee, you had also, I
Thank
made
you.
notes that you wanted to define financial interest, substantial interest, and
Okay.
private interest.
Yeah, I thought, you know, this is almost, it reminds me of the board members and stuff, commission members, is this might be a decent enough template
Mhm.
that could hand out for conflict of interest, so now we know
Exactly,
that.
yeah, that's,
That could be part of
the idea would be
education.
to expand this out and make it.
Here's a handout on what this really means.
Okay.
Oh yeah, because that's right. Because it was going to have the letter on this side, and if you look on the back side,
Oh.
it's got it
Was it the
quotes.
backside?
Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
it's got the relevant side, and so it refers you to that. It says see attachment for relevant section of ethics code, and this would be the attachment that would come with it. So we're like laying out the test that we
Nice
use
test, yeah.
for substantial interest.
Okay.
So if Glenda, you'll just,
All right, so we're
well,
gonna
I'm
continue
gonna
this.
ask
Oh,
you,
okay.
but
Until
I
next
will,
month?
just make an appointment and we'll
Yes,
just do it.
postpone.
We'll postpone this?
Okay.
Can I get this in Word format?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're on
So you
to,
could probably just whip it out and send it right now.
I probably would.
You got
In
it.
fact, I think
Right
I
there
did.
on your
I think I
phone.
did that the last meeting too. I think I said.
There are 4 disclosure forms to review.
are there active yellow tabs? Okay.
I think you were also having me like flag ones you wanted me to send the Miller letter to later on.
And that would be Mr. Ayers.
One. Oh, all 4 of these are new. Or do you want to add that
No,
one
I
to
meant
the
the one that,
get flagged?
I don't know, I'm just looking at, you said one you wanted to flag. Number
No, I
two.
said you have told me different ones to flag
Okay.
to send it.
I mean, I haven't read all of his, so I have to be careful here.
This actually is very common in the boards and commissions where past client comes before the board. So it's certainly not an automatic prohibition, and it is something they would discuss with the board itself. It'd be a disclosure issue.
Right, actually, after reading it all the way through, I have no problem.
Okay. And then the first one, Mr. Peterson?
What is the name of this group? The
Hand committee, isn't it? I don't know what the first one
Hand
is.
Commission?
It's a hand commission. It's a,
Oversight Subcommittee on Homelessness.
they deal with housing issues, and it's a complex group because a lot of them have ties to nonprofits and financing.
Yes, we've dealt with them before.
This term hasn't begun. It's not appointed yet, April 14th, unless this is like a re-up.
Okay. Do you have any problem with any of these?
See, and this one's an education
Yeah.
thing too, is that he needs to understand that
Mhm.
if we're his
Same
company
thing.
to bid in on
If
it.
something were to come
So
up.
we really do need to get some
Yeah.
type of a PowerPoint or a handout. Well, not necessarily this second, but
Right.
for all new board members, this is what that means.
I agree.
If you get a new contract, if you, maybe, the PowerPoint can cover that. You get a contract, a family member gets a contract, you wanna solicit business, I mean, here's the 8 times this really arises.
Well, if we get this letter that
Mhm.
you're all working on, this could go out as
Yeah.
kind of our form response to some of these too.
Right.
Okay.
I don't understand what the group does, so what their mission is. They, at
Well,
some
they were
point,
one of
they
those
work
that
on-
dealt with, you remember the commonly
Carly.
known as the
Carly
colored
Manor.
man, the red nose in?
Oh, so they do get involved in sort
Yes.
of like property development and
Yeah,
to-
and
to-
they're an oversight, they're a recommendation group. They make recommendations to the
Okay.
administration
I
on
see.
how to handle things.
Okay.
And we, without mentioning names, we had a complaint one time because one of the members worked for a nonprofit that got financing from somebody else that was related to somebody. I mean,
I see.
they're all together.
Right.
That's why you pick these board members.
Sure, they're
I
knowledgeable.
just wanted to put for the record that I talked to that person in a professional relationship, because that person's now been hired by the city. And that was one of the most traumatic things she's ever been through, was coming before our board, because it seemed very adjudicatory, and all these formal things we gave ahead of time, and she had to explain her position, and it was something that absolutely was traumatic. Now, this is a social worker person type, but still, it was interesting.
Well, and the whole time she's testifying to it, like Keith is cracking his knuckles.
Right.
Who
was hitting that guy? The
gavel?
gavel? Somebody was,
the
uh,
gavel.
gavel.
You were the chair at the time, you were hitting the gavel.
You know, I was hitting the
Yeah.
gavel. It can be intimidating.
Or was that,
SCOTUS.
what's her name, still the chair at the
No,
time?
no, it wasn't.
Was it you or?
Okay, so we're okay with these? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so,
I do agree that the first one here probably needs a little, he doesn't quite.
well, I'd like,
Yeah, I think the explanation of what a conflict and how to deal with it.
yeah, I like
is-
the concept of this letter going out sometimes to these people, the letter that we're working on to go out. Almost like when we send a disclosure, a
Yeah.
gift disclosure
Yeah.
letter to
I mean,
somebody.
if you can see that people are going to have occasional conflicts,
That's
and that's
right.
going to happen
And
on
that's
these
gonna be
commissions,
okay.
then
Just give
let's
them a
just send
heads
them.
up.
Yeah, send them something that just highlights. Look, here's the
Here's your
relevant
friendly
section of the
reminder.
codes.
No,
or
he's
here's
a-
sort of what you need to do when it does come up.
He's a
But
family
now
member because he's a CFO.
Okay.
Peterson.
Did you see the one for Kenneth Ayers?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
last
I read
one?
that
Yeah.
one actually.
So that
This
one's-
was-
okay,
He
so-
explains rather
Okay.
well how he would deal with it.
Right.
That was all.
Yeah,
of it.
that's kind of what I'd like to see people say more
Right,
often,
that's
right? So,
right.
hey, if it comes up, I'll disclose and recuse myself. I'm obviously not just going to plow on through, even if it's my clients who are.
Okay, review disclosure forms, compliance reports. That's what we had the testimony on earlier.
Oh, I have to tell you, I have a little thing. I have to take a second.
I mean, from the Assembly Department, legislative boards, municipal boards, commissions. Is
Oh,
that
yeah,
what
that's what we
we
were
were
talking
Yeah.
talking about earlier, right? So-
Right,
Yeah.
and so my piece of it, Assembly Department, if
Yeah.
you look at the compliance report, you'll see APOC
Yeah.
there. The municipal clerk's office will not be asking the elected officials to fill out a disclosure of present economic interest. There was just too much last year, and because the code has not been changed yet, I'm just not gonna go through that again.
Could you repeat that again, please? Who's not going to be doing this?
The Assembly members.
Assembly, they're not going to do these forms?
No, the municipal clerk has
Clerk's
made the
office already
decision not to even ask for them.
Really?
Yes.
Until we do a code change.
So until the code change is done, because it was a bit painful last year.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
they
we-
don't
we
have
could do
to.
a
The code
change.
says
Not
that.
minutes to do.
No.
I think we've been waiting on that code change
Okay.
of other things.
All right, that's fine, but we can't forget to address that in the code change.
Mhm. And again, they're not gonna be who the problem is in general. I mean,
No,
It's
yeah.
not the assembly, it's the LRSA elected
Right.
officials, so,
Right.
and we're gonna still ask for it from the LRSA people, so.
Okay. All right. Anything else to add then for 4C? Okay, so then we're on to 5A5. Residents' interest on that station.
We got one in this last time,
Okay.
and I don't know. We haven't had one in so long. I've just drawn a blank when we put it in. Does he even need to have it in?
Potential conflict with his sister.
It's his sister.
Works for the school district.
But he's bidding on a foreclosed property, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we see that there's any conflict between the two? It's not like she's involved in,
That's what
she's not in the tax department of the city that's monitoring the foreclosed property.
Yeah, I think is that what the code says? You have to be in you have to be working in the same
The
office that
department or-
administers the contract, right?
Right, okay.
So he should be in the clear. That should be, that should.
Well, and I did try to tell him that I didn't think he needed one, but he would rather pay the $15 and cover himself. So that's
Okay,
what we
well,
did.
okay.
All right.
Because he said it said in the package, he even showed me the piece of paper, and it seemed to say it that you have to disclose.
What
Okay.
is he? He works with whom?
He's an investor.
He doesn't work for anybody in the
Oh, private.
Oh,
municipality.
just private person?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Sister works for ASG.
Okay.
And the package said if you have a member of your household that works for the
Oh, I
municipality.
see.
Well,
Okay,
technically,
I'm-
since
yeah,
the
that's
si-
okay.
unless the sister lives with him, she's not technically part of the household.
Okay.
Okay.
that's
All right,
Okay.
we can
We have a
accept
motion
that.
to approve the consent agenda.
So made.
Is there a second? Second. I can second it, can I? Yeah.
I think we
second.
decided that.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing no objection. So now, we finally get on to
With fi-
Lisa.
with five
I
minutes-
think it's about time to shut down, isn't it?
With 5 minutes to go.
Jeez.
You ready for 1:30?
Starts like 2.
Okay. Go. All right, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
No, we appreciate all of your help, as always. New business. Oh, we can do the new business very quickly, it looks like. There's an Assembly Ethics and Elections Committee meeting. I think I went to the last one, didn't I?
Nobody went to the last one
No, because,
because I
what?
no.
They didn't have it.
They did too,
They
but
did,
but we
really
didn't.
have
Yeah,
anything to say.
we just didn't. Yeah.
Because I went to the one before then,
Yes.
and the one before that.
You were gone for that meeting, so we didn't
Okay.
commit you to it. Is
When
what
is
it
the
was.
next one?
Okay. The next
the next
one
one?
is April 22.
Upstairs in that
And,
little room.
April 22, and I can probably do it. Unless somebody else is
Do you have a
not
time?
doing it.
12 to 1.
Noon. Yeah, 12 to 1, but usually they'll handle the ethics stuff right away and get us out of there.
Yeah, it's like a 15-minute meeting.
Yeah, so April 22. April 22.
And I have an interesting report from Glenda and I, something that happened that we covered that would also be interesting for that group. And if you want, I can quick tell you, but if we're running out of time, it's not that important. You want to hear about it?
Sure.
Yeah.
The library called up and said, could they send out an email to 87,000 people saying, look at proposition number 3, bond proposition number 3.
The one that failed.
Yeah, the one that failed, because the library is hidden within that one. And so we went through all the bells and whistles, and this and that, and it was purely informational. It said it said that there's a library bond proposition contained within this. For further information, it referred them to the League of Women Voters. So now, how they do these 87,000 emails is on Nixle, which is a notification system, a software platform that the city subscribes to. So it is a use of a municipal resource. It doesn't cost any real money for the library to do it. And initially, by the way, their initial message was a little bit stronger to help support the automation of the libraries. And so we took out that part, just said it's buried within this bond part. So anyway, we looked at it and we thought, well, we think it is okay from the city viewpoint. It's theoretically informational. It doesn't have any advocacy. Is it use of municipal resources? But then I pointed out, and in fact I want to bring that case to you, is the APOC recently, last summer or so, came out with a new case, Huggins it's called, where they said when state legislators use their state email to support or not support an issue, that's okay. That's really what they're there for, that they can advocate, that in and of itself is not the APOC violation, but they would have to report that for financial reporting. So I have said to the Assembly, I said, well, this is a great new decision because it brings APOC sort of into the modern world. It doesn't cost anything to have a link on a website that says, I support this, I don't support this. If it's part of your municipal business, it's your position on port, refinancing, or construction or something, it couldn't be on something unrelated to municipal business. So anyway, this particular case, the library using Nexel to send out 87,000 emails. So it's like, whoa. And so we called Kathleen and we said, with APOC, what should we do with them? Can we just call someone and ask? She said, sure you can. And she gave us the name of the person, and we called the head APOC guy. Can't remember his name. I think Paul. I'll have that for the next meeting. And he and his research person, we wrote a little email that said, okay, this is what it's going to say. It's going to go out to 87,000 people. Is that okay? For 2 reasons. Is that okay, number one? And number two, is there going to be a reporting requirement? They said it is absolutely fine under APOC, and no, there won't be a reporting requirement. And I was sort of shocked, like, it's this easy to get an informal opinion, and they said that's what we're here for. We'd rather have people ask us ahead of time. So we let the library send out their 87,000 emails. I wish now it was a little bit stronger. It's really buried deep within this bond because I had to look for it, and you couldn't find it. It was for sure. But it's sort of blazing a new trail, I thought, in terms of using a resource. It is a municipal resource, although it's just a tie into a platform. When Mr. Trainee got us to agree, or not to agree, but not to disagree to his marijuana resolution, he had to report that to APOC. And then they penalized him too because it wasn't timely, and they had to figure out all the time it took for staff and the clerk's office. So that was one of those messy ones. But this was just clean. No, you're not advocating, and there's no reporting requirement. So.
If I may, what about the staff time to create the letter? And the staff time to work with you and everything else?
Well, they were just saying because they quoted a provision, so I'm glad you brought that up because I'll have to make sure I know that before I go to the other meeting, is that there is an exception that if it's for educational purposes, and they denoted that it is educational if you're saying the library one is contained within the arts.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was an exception, so it was interesting. I mean, I think the whole world has to move forward in the internet web world, and that certainly assembly members should be able to advocate, pro or not pro AO 37 on their own websites. Again, that's their leaders. They're the ones that should be able to advocate that when it's really of no real cost to the city. we're not spending money on brochures and telephone calls or staff time. So that's something, you know, Dave and I, when you and I look at that state ethics code too, to look at stuff like that. But anyway, that's a significant move forward for APOC. And it's based on this Huggins case, which I'll be glad to bring in next time.
Oh, that's great. Thanks,
Yeah,
Dave.
it's fascinating. So anyway, so Glenn and I had to resolve that because they called us a week before the election and all was fluttering. We went, 87,000 emails, really? So,
Yeah,
It sounds worse than it is, right?
And I
Yeah.
managed
It
to
sounds
miss
like
one of
it.
those. That's one email I didn't get.
So, all the unfinished business is gonna have to wait till next time. I don't see any other way around it.
well, can I say that the two matters that pertain to what Julia was talking
Yeah.
about, that I've been forever procrastinating about getting official permission? It sounds to me like we still do need official permission, both from Mike Abbott and from the mayor. So I don't think the mayor waived confidentiality as to that one. And so, Lisa, what I need to do is get exact copies of the things that we want them to approve. And I may have them, or I could walk down with you and get them, because I will then just send them a letter and say, can we have your formal permission? Because it sounds like there is a realistic gap here. And it's not simply, I kept debating back and forth between, well, wait a minute, can't we really just put these online? Or, well, no, it does say confidential. So for
No, it's
Julia to
better.
confirm it is a gap, let's get the permission this time forward.
Sure. Okay.
And so, but I need to know exactly what we would be putting on. And I think one was the scrub version, Terry, that you did on
Right.
the mayor one.
It's already online. Do you know
Is
that?
it? No.
Yeah.
Because is it under notice of potential violation?
Mm-hmm. This page that you printed off is the old page. I'm redoing some of this, and so I created a new page called 2014 you can link to,
I saw.
and it's
Okay.
got all the ones, and it's a little bit fixed up. But Julia had said something about we can't have this here, but if you'll notice, I went back. It's not like the advisory opinions where there's a summary of the
Right.
case. It is just quoting the code that was, they said that you're in violation of. All that is a quote of the code. So I went through and took all of the, summaries out and put just the code there, because I was thinking that we were moving towards a direction of having some sort of scrubbed educational piece to go with, there was a notice of a potential violation for this part of the code. Here's what the board came up with, all in a very generic way. So this is not anything specific to any case. It's just,
I know, so that's what I'm saying, but then, so the letter that was attached on the school bond one, and there were two things with respect to the mayor, are those in full on the website that you can get to?
yes. And one is scrubbed, and the other one was generic or
Okay,
scrubbed.
I guess then I'll try to find that.
Okay. But I'll send it to you regardless, but I just
Well, no,
wanted to
but
let you know it
if
was
it's on
out
the
there.
website, I want to see if it's on, and is it accessible enough to be helpful? I mean, maybe that's where we move it down into an education materials, elected official use of funds for ads, that we make it a little bit broader so that it's helpful.
That's what I thought about when Julia was sitting here. Maybe it shouldn't be by year, because who cares? It should be by subject matter.
Mhm.
And here are the cases that have come up under this subject matter.
Right.
No, that would be a nice.
Under
way to
this
do it,
code
yeah.
provision.
It was interesting when I'm going through, we ended up with 5 advisory opinions last year, and 3, there's almost a flip-flop of advisory opinions versus notice of potential violations. 3 notice of potential violations, and 5, and 4 of them were assembly members, which took a lot of time.
Okay,
Um,
so Lisa, I'll get
Okay.
with you.
Okay.
I'm sorry to keep that in
All right, so
No.
I have, I'll do a member comments.
Okay, so we're on the member comments. So I guess we'll postpone or continue at least most of the unfinished business from this meeting. But I understand we addressed at least the function reports. So,
Okay.
but let's just go to member comments then. Mr. Silva.
Well, it's actually under 8A in the annual report. I've done the annual report. It's, after listening to Julie, it might need some revision. And I already consider some revision. I think I need to cut down the amount of background information that's there for
Would you
the
like
education topic.
Would you like to edit it before we take a look at it?
I have edited it. and you can look at it any time. I sent it to Lisa.
But I mean, if you're gonna make more revisions,
Yeah, I think, I'd like to discuss with you guys, almost all the text from the previous year with respect to the education change, since that didn't really happen until 2014, I left it there. But I don't know that we need all that history and everything for the assembly this time. So I can modify that and send that in. You know, we're not in a
Okay.
rush to get it in. And I may want to look at, we may need some suggestions as to what, you know, what we want to do in a code rewrite that, you know, the bullet points that she was talking about.
Well, when
Yeah.
I looked at it, you know, where you had left all that historical data, I think that was important at that time because it was covering 2 years. And so that sort of summarized that and put us right in the middle of the fight. But now that it's been accomplished, I think you can reflect back in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. I can
of what was
really condense it
done.
down. There's like 4
Yeah.
pages
Right.
of stuff.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll also deal with that next, maybe.
We were also all given homework last time, and since you guys were not here, you didn't get the homework. And we were supposed to review the perspective code
State code here.
against
Yes.
the current code. I did not get mine's part done. I
Well,
think it
and
was the
the
executive.
others aren't here, and I assume they were assigned something also, so.
Which one did you
It was
get?
I think I had the executive. There was the employees, the executive, and the elected bodies.
Well, that's,
Employee, the commissions and the election.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the rewrite. We'll talk about that next time.
Because we're supposed to look at current code and compare the proposed code to that to
Right.
see what gaps might be there.
Well, and really, Keith, we're trying to make it simple is, if you're elected officials, and I would find out which one you are, because otherwise you're gonna be really.
Yeah, I know. I
Is
don't remember
is
which
to
one.
take the elected official portion of the code and just highlight any parts of it that are not in the state portion. I mean, just so it's not a written report, it's
Mhm.
simply
Yeah.
highlight stuff that the state code doesn't mention.
Doesn't cover.
So it should go fairly, you read the state code.
I have
and-
elected officials written down on my notes.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
And that's something I actually do need to bug the other two about, because once we have that, we can shoot forward.
Okay. All right, no one else?
That's all I had.
Okay, no one else from the audience is here. No one left. Want to move to adjourn? Second? Any opposition?
Nope.
Where's my hammer?
Hopefully I don't have.
Oh yeah, where'd your
Turn
hammer
off
go?
the
Hey.
tape.
It's underneath your pile of paper.
Here's my